Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News, and if you thought today's sprint race in Baku was rather uninspiring, thankfully we had Verstappen versus Russell to keep things spicy and a heated discussion during and after the Grand Prix. Some very spicy words exchanged here between the two of them. We're going to dive into all of it today. Who is at fault? Why is this such a big deal? Very much interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. So first of all, we had the sprint shootout of the day. Really strange to go from qualifying to quali again the next time they're on track here. We had Logan Sargent. If there's one session you don't want to crash in, it's probably this one, because right before the sprint, they couldn't repair his car in time. He smashed it into the wall and just coming into the final sector, and they withdrew him for the sprint. So that was unfortunate, especially because Albon was having good pace and could almost have got a point in the sprint race we'll get into. Charles Leclerc puts it on pole again for the sprint race. Kind of funny because on his final lap, he actually broke his front wing, but no one else could improve because you're only allowed one set of tyres. I think even if they were allowed multiple sets of tyres, there wouldn't even be a chance really to pit and go out again with only 8 minutes. So really it was just kind of a one and done qualifying. Leclerc set the fastest lap again. Great job from him. Russell, for pretty much the first time in the weekend, finally put together a good lap. I guess you remember that he's missed a Saturday, and if quali's on a Friday, maybe it's a different story, but a quali on a Saturday, Russell's always going to be there. So puts in a great lap to get ahead of Hamilton and also ahead of Sainz. So Leclerc, Perez, Verstappen, Russell, Sainz, Albon also P7, Alonso and Stroll again having DRS issues, which was not particularly effective for them. And also, meanwhile, they confirmed Formula 1 that the Azerbaijan Grand Prix will remain on the calendar until 2026. So, not exactly a surprise, but nonetheless, they decided to make it this weekend. Aston Martin also confirmed here they're working to resolve their DRS issue, as they successfully did when it got underway. And here we go then. So, the first lap was where all this incident kicks off. So, George Russell gets a phenomenal run onto Verstappen down into turn 1, kind of takes the lead on Verstappen into turn 1. This is after everything happens, but we'll dive into one of the images here in a second, because this was the real instant people are looking at, right? So into turn 1, they were pretty much side by side. Russell had his nose just in front and on the inside line going into turn 2, and this is a turn where it's really tricky to fit two cars through here side by side. Obviously, cold tyres. First lap, Russell comes in, clips the inside curb. Very tricky going into this corner to actually leave enough room on the outside, and Russell understeers a bit, hits the side of Verstappen's car, and he does give Verstappen just about enough room. I mean, you can argue that one or both drivers should have just backed out here. Verstappen could have potentially backed out and just, lived to fight another day, because fundamentally his car was way faster than the Mercedes and would have caught him up no problem at all. But Verstappen tried to hang it around the outside, which was, I think, a viable thing to do. There was enough room for Verstappen just about here, but Russell understeered, and the correction he had to make sent him in the start of Verstappen. So slight flaw and even side pod damage eventually for Verstappen throughout the rest of the race. And then on the run down into turn 3, Russell got a good run out of this corner and was able to hold this position, and even didn't really push Verstappen into the wall, but gave him the minimum possible room going into turn 3 here. So with some very hard racing from George Russell and Verstappen both. And I thought this was interesting at the time, because Russell is known the last couple of years to definitely get his elbows out on a first lap, and if there's a move that isn't against his teammate, he's going to go for it. And Verstappen has been known to do this for the last few years as well. There's plenty of examples over the last few years of Verstappen either just straight up forcing someone off track, obviously in the Hamilton collisions, and even in earlier days as well, and being very aggressive. That's Verstappen's racing style. So it is interesting that when Russell does it back to him in moves that were, okay, I think the elbows were out. It was aggressive driving from Russell, and yes, the contact into turn 2 wasn't ideal, but it's really tricky to fit two cars in there anyway. Sometimes these racing incidents happen. I don't think it was any more than a racing incident personally, and then Russell got very aggressive into turn 3 and got the position made. So Verstappen obviously not happy about it, and you can understand Verstappen not being happy about it, but I thought in my head that, alright, this, Verstappen's going to complain about this for a couple of laps, the stewards aren't going to do anything, and then they're going to move on. That was not the case at all. They certainly did not move on from this one. So Verstappen was on the radio straight away, he tapped me, that's how he got the position, report it to the stewards. The stewards didn't really think there was anything to this first lap, first couple of corners incident. I think it was a racing incident personally. These type of things happen, but you guys might disagree in the comments section below. And then Verstappen goes on to say, did he, Russell, really drive into the side of me? I don't get how he can damage my car and keep the position. I find it ridiculous. Now, if Verstappen had crashed out there and was actually forced fully into the wall and had broken his suspension or something, was out of the race, race, then yeah, Russell probably does get a 5-second penalty like what's happened with Sainz back in Austin. But the race continues, and also towards the end of the first, so I believe Yuki Tsunoda had a bit of a collision with Nick de Vries earlier on in the lap, and I think sustained a slight bit of front wing damage as a result. The front wing then kind of like failed. I think that's what happened anyway, because him just understeering into the wall there was kind of strange. His tyre comes off, virtual safety car, and then a full safety car. I don't know what the stewards were thinking, but whatever. They got back underway. Leclerc, going into the restart as well, was on the radio saying there was a cut, i.e. the engine just cut out, which was going to be a classic Ferrari moment around Baku, but thankfully that didn't happen for the rest of the sprint. Might happen tomorrow though. So the restart happens. Hamilton is trying to make a move on Sainz, but Sainz gets very aggressive on the brakes here, forces Hamilton to back out of the move, and then Alonso, you know how Alonso is, swoops in to take the position on Hamilton. So, and also Verstappen, as you can see, repassing Russell into the first corner. Kind of expected the long run down to turn one. The advantage in pure straight line speed of the Red Bull was enough to get the move done. And then on the radio, Verstappen made some interesting comments as well. A few laps later, Perez took Leclerc. Wasn't a massive surprise. Plus DRS for the Red Bull. Like, he was always going to get past. I was impressed though how Leclerc was able to stay with Perez for quite a few laps. Towards the end, Verstappen was chasing him down. Stroll with his DRS working took Albon for the final points paying position, but nothing really happened in the sprint, let's be honest here. The only interesting moment from that point on was when Verstappen got on the radio to say, you know, obviously his engineer says, without contact as well, nice move on Russell. Yeah, I know how to do that. And we don't exactly know what he said because it was bleeped out, but we got a rather good idea with what we're going to see here in a second. So this was the damage at play. You guys can see here the hole in the side pod of Max's car on the left-hand side where Russell touched him. I don't know if this fell off immediately, this piece, or whether it fell off kind of during the course of the race where, you know, more wear and tear, things just came loose, and then it fell off the car. Definitely was affecting performance. We don't exactly know how much, but he was losing a fair bit of time to Perez that you would expect him not to lose under normal conditions. So Perez wins, street circuit expert as it is. Great result for him. Obviously, not massive points differentials here in the placings. Hamilton really had no pace, to be honest, right? He couldn't really keep with Alonso. Russell, I thought, did a pretty respectable job to keep Sainz behind. So Russell P4, P5 for Sainz, Alonso P6, Stroll P8, but nothing really happens. When things got interesting, though, it was after the race. So there was some discussions going on, right? Max got out of the car, George got out of the car, and Russell says, look, I had no grip. We all had no grip. Next time, expect the same, says Verstappen. And that wasn't the only thing he said. He says, you know, he drops the dickhead in there as well. As he was walking away, he's like, I mean, just absolutely fantastic stuff. We all need to leave a little bit of space, says Verstappen. George Russell has now commented on this as well and says, I think as a driver, you know the risks when you're on the outside there. And I kind of agree in a way. Like, Russell had the inside line. He had the right to the corner in a sense. Verstappen went round the outside, and, you know, sometimes these things happen. I don't really think that either driver was at fault. It's just hard racing. And Russell says, I'm here to fight. I'm here to win. I'm not going to hold back just because he's leading the championship. None of the contact was intentional. So, you know, Russell, I think, rightly, in my opinion, not apologising for this. I don't exactly think there's anything to apologise for. But Russell is holding his ground, and Verstappen is, as he does, holding his ground as well. Very spicy stuff, right? And these were the images of the event. And even Verstappen in his post-race interview said, I don't understand why you need to take so much risk on lap one. And Russell would argue that actually it was Verstappen taking the risk and sticking it round the outside there. But, you know, whatever. Understeer to my side pod, create a hole. We have cold tyres, easy to lock up. His beautiful way of explaining it, it doesn't make sense, he says. And these, of course, the images. So it's very interesting, right, to me that, because I thought, in a way, that Verstappen, especially this year, having the godlike car that they do, you can look at Perez in the background looking at this incident unfolds. But, you know, with them having the dominant car, I imagine that Verstappen, I think he has for the last couple of seasons, eased off the gas pedal a little bit. He doesn't have to push everything to the absolute limit in terms of racing as he did a couple of years ago, because his car's good enough that he can, you know, let's say Australia, back off a bit, let the Mercedes have the places, gain them back over the course of the Grand Prix, which he did very successfully, and he can well do again. So I expected a similar circumstance here, right, in a way, where he'd be like, all right, whatever, Russell can have the move, I'll get him back in a few laps' time. But Verstappen is not slowing down, right? His personality is very much on show, right, all the time, no matter how good his car might be, and no matter if he's already got the championship sewn up, which he doesn't, but, you know, I would expect him to beat Perez this season, and realistically, that's the only competition. And then to make it even better, when Verstappen then says dickhead to Russell as he's walking off. So, you know, Drive to Survive absolutely salivating over this one. I'm sure they're going to make it a fun time, and no, it's fun to talk about as well. So fundamentally, right, there was nothing interesting to happen in the sprint, and this was the most interesting thing. So who's at fault? I don't exactly think there's anyone at fault particularly. I just think it's interesting that the personalities on display. I expect expected Max Verstappen to say what he said over the radio, and then at the end of the race think, okay, whatever, I got P3. I couldn't get Leclerc in the end, didn't quite have the pace to do so, probably because of this damage, but fundamentally, does it really matter? 6 points or 7, it's like, what's the big deal at the end of the day? And long may this type of stuff continue, because in the coming years, when Hamilton does retire, maybe 2 or 3 seasons, whatever it is, and Russell is the main man at Mercedes, as he may or may not be, like, yeah, this rivalry I don't think is going away anytime soon. This season, the Mercedes isn't competitive enough, but yeah, Russell versus Verstappen is going to be good for years to come, I think, and as Russell says here, he's got enough experience to know that if you're trying to overtake around the outside, there's a chance the guy on the inside will run wide into you. I don't think anything would have been different if the positions were reversed. So that's where we're going to leave it for today, but very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.